And welcome in to another episode of Tiger Territory, or the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I am Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who's writing a screenplay, and its title is Pardon My Flag Planting. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
You got a lot going on with that one. I do want to write a screenplay someday. I think there'd be something cool to do about like a sports writer who somehow gets like sucked into a gambling ring or something. Not saying I've ever experienced that, but just like maybe he's like covering a gambling ring and then the gamblers come after him. I don't know. I just think there's some cool ideas there. So
yeah, let's team up on that. I think I think that's a $1 million idea. So you guys, you watchers and listeners, will be the first to know when that is ready for publication. So if anybody's got any studio exec connects, holla at your boy. All right. So this episode is really theoretical in nature. That's kind of the best way to put this. We are, by this time next week, we will be through with winter meetings. So like we kind of wanted, and there's going to be some buzz that happens. So we kind of wanted to get ahead of this. We talked about Nolan Arenado trade possibility last week. And then we asked the listeners, give us some names if you want to go as far as some possibilities. We'll kind of talk about them, use some inspiration, and so like that's what we're going to do in this episode. So it's all in theory. It's all kind of fun. It's like the theory deep dive episode, really, of Tiger Territory. And so it's a blank canvas. So everything is technically possible doing this exercise. Before we get to that, though, I did want to sort of ask you, Cody, because, things are happening constantly. Rumors are out there, and, you're talking to people in and out of the game. Like, do we have, as we're about, 6-ish days from this Nolan kind of loose idea thing kind of being floated out there for the Tigers, like, do we have any sort of gauge on, I don't know if realistic's the right word, or just like the parameters involved in like how realistic the possibility is? Realistic the possibility. What a phrase. Realistic the possibility.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like I've thought about that. It ended up getting a lot of kind of response and more play on social media than I would have expected and probably would have liked. But like I think the Tigers' interest in Arenado is an option. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. That doesn't mean it's dead set. But I think there are some people in the front office who find it to be an intriguing option to explore. And especially when you kind of take it into context, like if the Tigers are serious about acquiring a third baseman, who are you going to get? I think there is one guy who checks every box, and that is Alex Bregman. And he is naturally going to be the most expensive and, depending on what other teams do, perhaps out of their reach. You're going to get Willy Adames to play. I don't know. Supposedly the Yankees are prepared to go all in on Adames if they don't get Soto. Like these guys are going to get real expensive. And if the Tigers want to look for a fallback option, a depreciating asset in Arenado could make a lot of sense. Now, as I've thought about it more, and I never really loved the idea, but there's some things about it that are interesting. One reason that strikes me as very strange is that I mentioned this last week, but Arenado has not hit left-handers in the past 2 years. If the goal is to acquire another bat who hits lefties, and he's done it throughout the course of his career, but the past 2 years, the splits have become oddly reverse. So again, maybe the Tigers know something there, but that gives me big pause, not even getting into the bat speed decline. It's just like, why is he not hitting left-handed pitching? That's literally not what they want. And I think the other thing that came up, and you mentioned this, but Arenado has a full no trade clause. If any deal were to get pitched, like he would have to approve it. He would want to have to come to Detroit. The Athletic's Katie Wu has mentioned like he would be willing to waive it for a contender. How do you define contender? Would Nolan Arenado? I think most fans would now say, oh, well, the Tigers made the playoffs. They're contenders. Does that mean Nolan Arenado views the Tigers as contenders? I don't know. Young team, not the last year tough division, but in theory, like a winnable division, just made the playoffs. There are definitely some good selling points. You also, the classic battles of like getting a hitter to want to come to Comerica Park and wanting to play in April and May in Detroit, and like wanting to come to Detroit as a city, which even though I think Detroit's a great city, the rest of the world doesn't quite understand that yet. So like those are some factors to consider. Even if the Tigers were all in on Arenado, that doesn't necessarily mean they could even get the deal done. They would have to convince him, or he would have to be willing to waive that no trade.
Yeah, and that's where representation kind of runs things a little bit. It's not his job to be like abreast to like how close the Tigers actually are to like winning a World Series, right? Like that's something that his representatives have to like either move him in this direction or move him in that direction. That's their job. It should be noted, and I just say this as something of note. I'm not saying there's a lot of gravity to it, but he has played in 8 postseason games, and he has a batting average of 152 in those 8 postseason games. Just putting it out there. If you're trading for him thinking that here's a guy that's an experienced vet that can help us kind of go over the top in the postseason, he has some experience, but this whole current crop of Tigers, how many playoff games did the Tigers play this year? They played 7, right? 2 in Houston and then 5 against Cleveland. So that's almost his entire postseason career right there. And so like he would be coming in with almost equal sample size of postseason experience. Just a note. I'm not even saying it matters all that much. And again, like I find myself really looking at how are people viewing Detroit. Media seems to be all in, like respecting the playoff run, respecting the advancement of Skubal and Green up the game, and then obviously AJ Hinch, like Colt Keith getting some buzz, like these guys. Like the media is giving Detroit, I believe, an adequate amount of flowers for what they.
Too much? Is it too much?
There's an argument to be made because even in advanced playoff era, year-to-year stuff is hard. All right, just ask Arizona, right? Ask Texas. Both World Series from 2 years ago didn't make the postseason, right? So it's hard. It is very difficult to do. So one run does not make a contender, right? I think that's very fair to say. So if players, Nolan in this case, but if players aren't like they're looking for a contender and the name Tigers is not on their exemption list for their clause, that's going to tell us a little bit about how other people around and in the game look at the Tigers. So in regards to this exercise, Cody, I realize why I feel like I underachieve in fantasy football and basketball and baseball is because I look at other teams and then I think like, is there a trade that makes sense for me and this person? And then, if you get an offer, and a lot of times I'm like, actually, I kind of like what I have more than what is being offered. And so a lot of times I don't make trades. And so like, as I went through this exercise, I was like, all right, well, does this player make sense? I guess, but you're not going to get this player. Does this player make sense? Maybe, but why? If they're going to give him away, like what's the reason here? And you kind of follow yourself into like a couple categories. It's like either a salary dump or an age dump, or like an unproven player that they just don't have room for. And so outside of these like blockbuster trades that get talked about years later, your Mookie Betts of the world, your Stantons of the world, like even though that it's not like they got a lot for Stanton, but you understand what I'm saying, like these big trades, like it's not really the most sexy work. and so like I say this as an appreciation for everybody that sent us names and ideas, because like, I didn't find myself like finding something and I thought, got it, this is the move, text it to Scott, I want Cody to break the news if you actually do this, like I just didn't get that. As you went through this exercise, like what kind of like, how did you feel going through this exercise?
I didn't necessarily brainstorm a ton of my own trades, and I think almost as a matter of principle, I don't really do that because it's very hard to pull off. Almost every trade that has unfolded the Tigers get back some prospect that, if I'm being real, I don't know very much about. And then part of my job, I look them up on the same sites we all have access to. Maybe I can get an opinion or two from a scout, which even then, like, that's a Trey Sweeney. There's literally one scout like, oh yeah, not a shortstop. And there's another scout like, oh, great glove. So like, you can write one scout said he has a poor glove, and then that becomes attached to Trey Sweeney. And that's not entirely fair. Even scouts have very differing opinions. So that's all to say, like, this is hard stuff. There's a reason executives will tell you trading is way harder than people think, especially in probably the last 5-10 years, when teams value prospects probably higher than ever, when there's so much analytical analysis that goes into everything, and teams are just not going to make a deal if it's not clear they're going to win it. Like, a lot of these trades end up being kind of washes or low risk moves, except maybe at the deadline when certain teams get a little bit more desperate, or if it's Al Avila and you're just trading like big names for very bad prospects.
Prospects that didn't have lasting life.
That's a better way to put it. That's a kind of way to put it, for sure.
So, all right, we just talked about him. We have a mock-up right here, Cody, of Nolan Arenado, and it's not like breaking from what we had talked about, but Nolan Arenado, you're going to give up pitching in the mold of Casey Mize. You're going to give up pitching in the mold of Matt Manning. Is that enough? Again, we talked last week. There will be conversations about cash, and credit to everybody who included that in their like speculation, because again, that means that you're thinking in depth on this stuff. So shout out to everybody there. I'll say this in general. I'm big bats guy over arms, like in this stuff, and so that's what the Flaherty deal. That's why I liked it at the time, not knowing nearly how good Lorenzo would be and how important Sweeney would be, but like I like that in theory. And then if you consider yourself a factory for pitchers, like this is the kind, like the theory of move that you should be comfortable pulling the proverbial trigger on. Is that like we'll give a pitcher that we like, but we're not in love with, that we feel like we could replicate in some way for something that we can't replicate right now. And in this case, it's Nolan Arenado. So like, is it as simple as, would you do this? Would you do Nolan for Casey or Manning?
Yeah, this trade proposal came to us from Alex Gray. So again, we're taking suggestions from listeners, viewers, readers, and appreciate everyone who participated here. And this was actually Arenado and cash. I didn't include the word cash on our graphic here. If I were the Tigers, I would do this in a heartbeat. I mean, there are some people who are like, maybe they should just non-tender Casey Mize. Well, you're going to get Nolan Arenado for Casey Mize? Sure. Yeah, I would do that. If I were the Cardinals, and this is why trades are hard. If I were the Cardinals, I don't think this is enough. And I think this comes up a lot with Tigers people. There's a tendency to obviously value Casey Mize or Matt Manning highly because they were such touted prospects. But to the rest of the league, who's not going to have that implicit bias, I just am not sure either of these guys have much value. Mize probably more so than Manning. But if I'm the Cardinals, I want more. I want some kind of bat involved here. I mean, I think a more realistic starting point would be like Mize and Jace Young. And then if you're the Tigers, it's like, okay, what do we really think of Jace Young? Are we sure we want to give up a promising young hitter for Nolan Arenado in his mid-30s? Like, I'm not sure. That would very much depend on their evaluation, and then that starts to feel a little bit risky. So can you like talk yourself down? Casey Mize and Max Anderson, is that enough? Something along those lines. Hard to say, but I definitely think it would take more than one player, and I think definitely some sort of hitting prospect, probably for the Cardinals to actually want to make that move.
Yeah, you're probably.
I guess somewhat depends how bad they want to part with that $32 million and how much cash they would throw in. But like, as much as they want to cut payroll, I don't think they're just going to do this for nothing.
No, they're not, and because it's still, it's a savvy organization. They're going to look at it as an asset and go from there. I did want to. We'll stick with the infield and the shortstop position. So this is a name that got brought up a couple times, including from Patrick McCulloch, who wanted to look into Bo Bichette over there in Toronto, and a player that like I have liked for a long time. Like I am a Bo Bichette guy. You would have to be really confident in your evaluation of him and what went on in 2024, because we're going to bring up this a couple times, but offensive, WPA, wins probability added, negative 1.5, negative 1 point, and it's just offense for the record. But negative 1.5 win probability added, and he had a calf. He broke his middle finger. Like, he didn't play that much this season, so that's part of it. That's a guy that you have to. You're banking on this trade being something that we're getting pre-2024 Bo Bichette, and then also you throw in what would then become a clog in the middle of your infield. But partially this would save it a little bit. You trade Sweeney, you trade Young, you trade Tide Madden. I would say these are prospects or prospects / like young players that, intrigued by, but I would be willing to throw all these guys in a trade if I thought I was getting like a good player in return with the contractual stuff and, years of control, or, however many years left. These guys, in theory, I'm cool parting ways with for the right situation. So, like, this intrigues me if you get the numbers that you like out of Bo.
Yeah, for as much as, like, I'm not sure, like, trading Jace Young comes with some inherent risk. He is probably their most tradable young bat. It doesn't seem like they're in love with him. He is major league ready or close to major league ready, and you would think he would hold some value to other teams. So I do think he could be a trade chip if the Tigers wanted to do that. In terms of evaluating like whether this is a realistic deal, Bichette for Young, Sweeney, Madden, got to consider right now, the Blue Jays don't seem to want to trade anyone. Now, I feel pretty strongly that they need to stop holding out hope, and they should try to trade both Vlad Jr. and Bo Bichette right now, because assuming they don't get Juan Soto, and doesn't sound like they're going to, like, what is their plan? And it sounds right now that this would be a non-starter. If something changes and the Jays did decide to make this trade, I don't think it's necessarily unfair, but I wouldn't do it if I were the Tigers for 1 year of Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette's on an expiring contract. For talking 3 years, okay, maybe. But Bo Bichette coming off a down year, 1 year of team control. You're giving up a young shortstop who you like. And I mean, who's going to be worth more WAR next year? Trey Sweeney or Bo Bichette? Like, Bo Bichette plays like he did last year. It might be Trey Sweeney. Jace Young, who has talent. And then I actually think Ty Madden might be the most valuable of all these guys. I'm not saying he's going to be like an ace or something, but like Ty Madden's probably going to pitch in the big leagues for a long time, maybe as a starter, maybe as a reliever. I just think he's going to be a valuable piece, in the league for years to come. So even though he may not have a super high ceiling, probably not someone I would be, really willing to give up unless, as you said, it were the right deal. Don't think 1 year Bo Bichette helps the Tigers out enough, especially when it means parting with this caliber of assets.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Talking about all these, go ahead.
Well, while we're on that, like the name Ha-Sung Kim has come up a little bit recently, and he would be, in theory, maybe willing to sign a 1 year pillow deal. Not going to be healthy at the start of the year. Unsure how long he would actually be out. But I've always liked that idea. I think you would have to add more. You'd have to get like a first baseman too to add some power to your lineup. But if you get like Kim and Christian Walker, like I think that, other than paying for Bregman, that might be the option I like most for the Tigers. So you get this 1 year shortstop third baseman, kind of like Bichette, without having to give up young talent.
Yeah, I mean, the Kim name is one that intrigues me greatly, and I think that's a low key buzz name that people are bringing up, and so now we can throw our hat into the ring of being like, this makes some sense. Like this makes a lot of sense for both parties potentially, and it wouldn't, again, I say cost, but it's not going to strip you the way some of these trades that we're talking about are. All right, before we move on, we have ourselves a HelloFresh ad. So I hope you're hungry, because if you are, you're about to be even more hungry. So please stay tuned for a word from our sponsor, HelloFresh.
Holiday shopping gets hectic. Why don't you let America's #1 meal kit help you out? HelloFresh has over 50 recipes to choose from each week. They pre-portion the ingredients and then ship them right to your doorstep.
If you're looking to fit a specific lifestyle, HelloFresh features preferences like fit and wholesome, quick and easy, or a vegetarian option for you too.
HelloFresh helps you eat healthier and stress less about how you're getting the ingredients and ideas for that perfect home-cooked meal.
In many parts of the country, it's cold out, so skip the hassle and snuggle up next to your phone or your computer and pick out your favorite recipes. Then let HelloFresh handle the planning, the shopping, and most of the prep. It's easier than ever to get dinner on the table, quick and painless. We've made many of these recipes ourselves, and they are delicious. Trust me.
Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free-FT. Applied across 7 boxes. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/free-FT.
All right, thank you to our
Scott
friend
Braun and AJ Brzezinski for their little ad. AJ did not like that I put Nick Castellanos at number 10 on my list of MLB's worst contracts.
Ooh,
there's a reason the Phillies are trying to move him. There's a reason that's going to be a hard contract to move. That's all I got to say about that. I like Nick as a guy, as a player, but like, come on, 20 mil for 2 more years.
Are you? But so we don't have him on this label. Is there? But you brought him up. Is there a buy low opportunity on Nick? Is there? This question.
I wouldn't want to send much talent for him. If you're telling me the Tigers could have Nick Castellanos and he would be a DH only, I think that would improve their lineup. Now, obviously, they don't want a DH only. I wouldn't want to play him in right field.
Yeah.
So,
but
ultimately, no.
So that's another thing too about all this stuff is that, like, you mentioned the whole check boxes thing with Bregman, is that like you're just not checking a lot of boxes on these deals. Like that's just the bottom line, and that's again why it's hard and why a lot of times these are players that aren't really on our radar that end up getting moved. And turns out Matt Vierling turns out to be like one of the more valuable player of the trade. You know what I mean? It's just, but who was going to go in like thinking that or whatever. So, all right, let's go in division. Cody.
Ooh.
Luis Robert Jr.
Ooh.
Another team, the White Sox, that I still think, do they know exactly how they want to play out this? Because they get the new manager, they get the, they have a young regime in the front office. And Reinsdorf is like a baseball guy, and he, puts that long letter about like how this is not up to the standards and, blah, blah, blah. Problem is, like, the only way to do that is to spend your way out of it, and they're not going to do that by all accounts. And so, like, Luis Robert is a guy that, 1.4 WAR last year. That's higher than I thought, given where he was struggling at times. But he was a 5 WAR player in 2023. He is 27. He turned 27 in August, so he'll be basically the whole year. He'll be 27 years old. Center fielder in division, though. That'd be a the young front offices don't care as much about that, I feel like, but it is still a thing. And again, the balanced schedule, plays into that a little bit as well. But we have here Luis Robert Jr. for Jace Young, Lee, and Workman. So,
yeah, if I were the White Sox, I wouldn't care about trading in division. You're not contending in this division for at least a couple more years. And if you're the White Sox, you have a lot of incentive to move both Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert Jr. I don't think the Tigers would ever, at least this year, be in on Luis Robert Jr. That would require the White Sox not moving him, and then probably Parker Meadows really struggling and Max Clark looking like he's a couple years away, and you'd have to be like, man, we don't have a center fielder. What are we going to do? Like, that's the only reason I think they would even have any interest. And it's tough to know, I think, what the White Sox are going to get for Robert for the reason you stated. They're going to try to sell the 5-WAR version of him, but it seems to be like he maybe is a little too risky. He had a rough year. So if let's just say for some reason, God forbid, let's say Parker Meadows gets injured or something, we don't want that to happen. But Tigers, this hypothetical world, suddenly they have interest. Jace Young, Hao-Yu Lee, Gage, Workman. Would you do that? Ooh. Workman, as much as he's an intriguing athlete, probably not going to have a lot of big league upside, I don't think. Jace Young, we've talked about a lot, like some things to like, but he's tradable. Hao-Yu Lee, the Tigers seem to really like, but if you're trying to acquire a premium talent in center field, I wouldn't hate doing it. I think the question for the White Sox, is it enough for them? Are they going to want a pitcher in the deal? Are they going to want someone who's a little more of a sure thing than Jace, but maybe a little more of a ceiling than Hao-Yu Lee? I don't know. On paper, I don't hate this, but in reality, I think it would never happen.
Yeah, I mean, we have Young on several of these trades, and one of the difficult parts of this exercise is like I just don't know how good he is as a major leaguer, and therefore I have no idea what kind of market he could command, or like what his perception would be to be included in any deal. So like that's just another hurdle that we have to do when we go through this, which is fine. But that's again what makes this stuff so challenging. Another name that was intriguing. This comes from Matt Riddle and a couple others. Luis Rengifo of the Angels. He is basically plays everything but first base, and 1.9 WAR guy last year. Cody doesn't have a lot of power. He decent on base. I was looking at teams that I was like, I don't know what direction they're going. So like I was Angels perpetually on that list, right? So
no idea what they're doing.
So he is, let me get his age here, another 27, but he'll be 28 next season. His birthday's in February, and he is on he's basically a contract year. He'll be a free agent next season. And we have here recent riser Ham, Max Anderson, or Young, and Melton. So you have a couple options here. What's your thoughts?
My initial thought is no way. Of all the trades we got, I'd probably I'm not sure Rengifo is a huge fit. I guess the versatility is nice, but I think this would be giving up way too much for 1 year of Luis Rengifo. I would not want to part with Ham and Max Anderson. That's no way, non-starter. Jaden Ham, Tigers like a lot, could have a very bright future. And even Jace Young, I'd rather let things play out with Young than acquire 1 year of Rengifo. He's got some speed. He can play different positions. Then, didn't hit for much power last year, has hit 16, 17 homers in the past, but he has never been worth more than 1.7 WAR on Fangraphs, and it's 1 year. I just don't think the Tigers are getting much benefit. I would not give up an ounce of young talent for 1 year of Luis Rengifo.
Yeah.
That's it lefties a little bit. I think more so than being a starter, he would be an upgrade for Andy Ibanez is really where he would kind of fit. And I wouldn't trade for that,
Yeah. And again, there are a lot of numbers that tell you, and anecdotally as well, just watching the game, that the value of Andy Ibanez, it's not something you have to upgrade on. And obviously it's a guy that AJ Hinch values having in the rotation. All right, let's go to another. We have a theme here, Cody. Another team that seems to be up in the air, and this one is almost literal because their home for the foreseeable future is kind of up in the air. That's the Athletics, formerly of Oakland, will be of Sacramento, and might not ever be of Vegas. I guess we will see. Brent Rooker he's a popular guy that I feel like he's that dude that it's like every fan base wants to save him. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like come here, like come here and be a part of an organization that that values you. Not to say that the A's don't, but like that you're just going to be in a more comfortable situation.
Didn't they come out and say they're not trading him? I think they value him.
Yeah, they value him. So still, he is a guy that almost every team would love to have, like that guy. You want that guy in your clubhouse, in your lineup. And so DH, he's got some outfield in his past. He's 30 years old. Let me get that birthday. Yeah, he just turned 30, so it'll be his age 30 season. Pretty healthy 5.6 WAR last year, Cody. And he is under team control for, if I do my math right, 3 more years, I believe. Free agent in 2028. So it's a guy that's probably going to cost you something that you like. And that's what we have here with Jay Hen, Ty Madden, and Roberto Campos. So I like this. I kind of like it because I feel like I like it because I don't like what I have to give up for it, if that makes sense, which to me means it probably has some validity, is what I'll say.
This is an interesting one, and this came from Brayton Martin. And, Rooker was a trendy name there for a while, and I think he kind of fell off once people realized, you really don't want to have to play him in the outfield a lot. Again, a little bit in the Castellanos mold of, best suited as just a DH. But he's a little younger. I think he could play some outfield if, a guy on this proposed trade, Jahan, could you just give him a first baseman's man? See how that goes? I still kind of like Brent Rooker, man. Even if they acquired him to be a glorified platoon outfielder, he's better than that. He was just a 5-win player, but I think there could be some room for him still on the Tigers. They would just have to be willing to devote a lot of time to that DH spot. So probably wouldn't happen, but if they were, Jahan, Ty Madden, Roberto Campos. What do we think? Jahan, I think people around Detroit still like Jahan, but what is he really? Does he even have a path to a roster spot next year? Very hard to say. Honestly, you're hoping Jahan becomes something remotely close to Brent Rooker. And it's probably unlikely that Jahan's ever going to hit 39 homers or whatever. Ty Madden, like I said, maybe not super high ceiling, but this guy's going to pitch in the big leagues for a long time, I think. And Roberto Campos, once viewed as a high upside prospect, I don't think he would have a lot of value around the league. I think if they were a team that were you know what, we still have faith in Roberto Campos. He can post some big exit velocities, even though he doesn't lift the ball very much. You would have to be I personally would be willing to do that. The package of all 3 of them starts to feel a little steep, but I kind of think that's just because in our little orbit in Detroit, it's easy to overvalue Justin Henry Malloy. I mean, there's a reason the Tigers got him for Joe Jimenez. I kind of like this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would phrase it like this. If the Tigers brass truly felt that they were one impact bat that easily slides into your starting lineup, I feel like this is a trade that you do to put yourself over the top. I don't think the Tigers front office views the team as that close. I think they view them as we're in the mix, but we're not at the position where we want to deal away with 2 of our more valuable, major league, if you want to be cruel about it, fringe major league assets. But if they were, say, the Guardians, maybe, that you felt like you just needed that one impact bat where you didn't really feel like you were that outplayed by the Yankees or something to go to the World Series. This honestly could be one of those reactionary moves that makes a lot of sense and then maybe blows up in your face. But at the time you feel like it makes sense to do, I like this. I do like this trade. It's not going to happen for a variety of reasons, but I wouldn't mind saving Brent but then you feel bad for Jahan and Ty and, sending them to the city list, technically A's, and so yeah. I mean, but This gives me like I was just nodding my head the entire time. I was like, yeah.
Let's talk about this other one we got from Brayton Martin, because he sent us some intriguing ones. One of these third base fallback options, Jake Berger, Miami. That's been like rumored a little bit. I don't like Berger as much as I think some people. I mean, it seemed like a lot of our listeners did not like the Arenado, very much, but he was worth more WAR than fan favorite Jake Berger last year. Berger brings some power, 34 homers 2 years ago, 29 last year, only a 301 OBP, only a 106 WRC plus last season, whiffs a lot, doesn't 5.4% walk rate. Like, there are just some things. I think if the Tigers got him, he would help their lineup over, just trotting out Matt Vierling at third. But I don't love his profile as a player. And then I see this, Max Anderson and Trevin Michael. Michael, I believe, is like a 27, 28-year-old pitcher who was still in high A last year. Max Anderson, well-regarded college bat out of Nebraska, has done some good things, but still in the lower rungs of the minors. I think I would do this. I don't know that I think the Marlins might want a little bit more in return, probably especially in the pitching side. Swap out Michael for a Ty Madden, or I don't know. Could you get someone to like really believe in Alex Lang, something like that? I think it would take a little more, most likely, even though it's the Marlins and they're just trying to cut money. If I were Miami, I would try to get more out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel it's pitchers, bro. Like, there's got to be some guy in between Michael and those names that you just listed. And I'm not going to try to like throw more hypothetical names in the trades, but like, you know what I mean? Like, there's tiers of guys that you think you could probably sell this a little bit better. Again, like, I have
Michael was in Erie through 53 innings in Erie, 3.52 ERA, mostly out of the bullpen.
It'd be nice to have a 30 home run guy, which he nearly was, Berger, last year. At the same time, going back to, WPA, and this is just offensive, like, he was 0.1, negative 0.1. So, like, so the counting numbers, some of them look good, but then you throw in the whole picture, and it's like, so we're trading a decent bat in our system, or at least profile wise, and some pitcher that we think has something or whatever, for a guy who is about to turn 29. He doesn't have any defensive upside at all, and like, offensively, his whole picture is just based on one stat. Like, it's hard to say like he's putting us in like better positions. Now, he is 3 more years, I think, under team control. I got that wrong last time, so I wanted to make sure I got it right this time. It just, like,
negative defender at third. He's probably going to play some first if he were to come to Detroit. But is he a one-tool player?
I think he's a one-tool player. I do think he's a one-tool player. And then again, where are your assets allocations if you're trading for one-tool players? Like, I'm not against this trade.
I mean, I would take 30 home runs for not giving up all that much.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, I'm just telling you, the thing about this trade is that it's going to be frustrating to watch him, like, once he's on your squad. And I say this with all due respect, but like, I doubt you're gonna remember 30 home runs if he played a whole year in Comerica Park. You're gonna think about some of the other aspects of his game that fell short. So, like, you're right to say you're giving up nothing actually tangible at this point, but I would not bank my team trying to win a division on acquiring Jake Berger. I think it's probably like the best way I would phrase that. Is that fair?
I think I would almost rather just stay with Spencer Torkelson than Jake Berger. There are kind of some similarities between them, which is not necessarily inspiring. And with Torque, at least there's still kind of the gamble that like there's just a monster in there if only you can unleash it.
And that's another thing as we wrap up here, to that, just like I keep coming to, is that like it'd be a lot easier if you either Scott Harris or you, the hypothetical person doing this, just had a strong conviction about Torque. like, all right, well, we got to move off fast. And so like you start looking at more of the burger types. Whereas if you're thinking maybe there's still something here, like it's hard to make moves that way. I will say I'll just throw in one name real quick. It's not a hypothetical trade. And I'm just going back to our Oklahoma State roots here, Cody. Cincinnati Reds corner infielder Christian Encarnacion Strand. The guy who with the new Fanatics jerseys had the worst looking jersey because of his long name. Longest name ever, I believe, in Major League Baseball history. Mainly a first baseman right now. He hasn't got a lot of run because of injury. He had some limited time in the AFL just to get some live at bats. We all know, take that for a grain of salt, but he was, 7-14, several walks. It seemed like he was at least seeing and hitting the ball well for what you're supposed to do when he's a guy of that talent. And in theory, being like 25 years old, he should still have some third baseman left in him. So that's a name that I think, like, what are the Reds doing? Could you get something like that for not an asset you're not going to miss all that much? So I would just throw that out there. And then just real quick, I'm not saying we have to talk about it. Nobody mentioned Cody Bellinger. Not one person, at least that I saw, mentioned Cody Bellinger, who is another guy that's like out there on the trade block. I know he's a lefty. I know there's all these things.
That's why a lefty bat just doesn't make a lot of sense, especially another lefty bat. You're kind of gambling on which version are you going to get. Real quick, your Encarnacion Strand point, like, I'd love to have him in AAA if I were the Tigers. If you get him, I'm not sure he's making your major league roster, but interesting. Walked a lot in AAA, has not walked much in the majors. Maybe doesn't jump out at me, but if you could get him at the deadline as a throw in some other deal or whatever and be depth, like, I'd feel good about that. Yeah,
for sure. Man, there's just so many ways that we can go here, and I thought credit to everybody that sent us these trades and engaged with us here, because these were thoughtful. There's a version of the.
Let us know why we're wrong.
Yeah,
hop in the comments on this one for sure.
Yeah, like there's a version of this where this was entirely dumb, and this was not. This was like smart theoretical baseball talk as we're wrapping up things in theory and going into hopefully some more things in action. I know moves have happened here and there, but like more things in action. So want to remind everybody, follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Tiger Territory on X. He is at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran _Steckley. The pod page is at Tiger Territory _. Be sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel so you can watch and engage with us there as we continue to grow that lean into the next season. So thank you everybody again for giving us some great talking points here. And I want to thank Cody for taking the time. And so for Cody Stavenhagen, I and Kieran Steckley, everybody have a great day.